Welcome aboard. Welcome to Fishing Without Bait, a lifetime without definitive expectations and full impact mindfulness, where we help people explode into their lives. We're looking for people who are not looking to find themselves, but perhaps to create themselves. There are no admission requirements other than the honesty, open mindedness, and willingness to try. If you're welcome nowhere else, you're welcome here. So buckle yourselves up and let's the journey begin. And as always, we attempt to have an eclectic roster of guests, and we're also always interested in presenting stories of recovery. And keep in mind that everyone is in recovery from something, whether it's in anxiety, depression, other substances, biting your fingernails, eating too many Skittles. However, unlike perhaps some other self help type of books or organizations, we just don't tell you to hula hoop because it's good for you. What we do is like to have people show you exactly how it was done. All right. This isn't a program about people coming on and gathering sympathy. It's about saying, okay, here's where I was. However, here's what I did about it. And I've known this gentleman for a number of years, and I've always been impressed with his sincerity and genuineness. We're always interested in meeting genuine people, because we live in a world that seems to be telling us how we should be, and we try to fit into this grand type of scheme.
Absolutely.
So, could you tell us a bit about yourself? And I don't. I'm going to give people a break tonight because usually, as everyone out there knows, I'm in love with the sound of my own voice. However, the last time I heard this gentleman speak, I actually kept my mouth shut.
I was born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, um, Southwest Baltimore. Uh, at the time, it was a diverse neighborhood, and it just seemed like normal life to me.
Well, what did you have to compare it to? Really nothing.
Yeah, nothing whatsoever. I didn't even realize that there was a broad horizon of people. When I was growing up, I remember I originally came to Pennsylvania when I think I was 11 years old, and I went back shortly after. And I remember when I came up for good, I was 18 years old, and I'm fresh out of the inner city of Baltimore, and I go to play basketball at the local park, and there's hippies playing banjos, and I'll never forget the shock and awe on my face from going from one extreme to the vast other at that point in my life. So um,
Well, all of us, it's our past that propels us to our present. And what we often suggest to people is it's their past. However, we ask them not to regret it, whether we can turn that into experience and wisdom. So I guess you packed a lot of living into those 18 years, Mr. Will.
absolutely, I've lived in, I think, in some form or another, probably 7 different states. I might be, I don't know the exact count. We went around a lot, but we did a lot of traveling. I think to this day, like, I can usually get to a stop sign, and even if I don't know where I'm at, I can know which way I'm going. And I think it's because we just traveled my whole entire life. Um,
So you had a gut type of feeling. Usually, when I talk to people, I ask them, "When did you begin to realize that your life wasn't exactly like the other people's?" And usually, it's when they tell me, "When I started to have sleepovers at other people's houses, I realized that perhaps other families and other situations weren't like mine."
um, no, it was when I moved here,
Yeah.
because everybody's family was like mine back there, and if they weren't, um, I generally wasn't allowed to stay over at their house.
Because
Well, you know, my dad had a very wide reputation
uh-huh.
for what he was like,
So
in the
you
neighborhood.
might be telling us that your father was colorful.
to say the least. To say the least. Yeah, I think he spent a total of 33 years in the Maryland State Penal System.
Mm,
So
okay.
he had a very extreme reputation.
Yeah. So what you're saying, and he wasn't a member of the Golden Rule Club.
No, not at all.
So how did that play out with a young Will?
Um, well, I think that it made for a lack of guidance because my mom, you know, she worked a lot, and I stayed with various family members, growing up in the city, and by the time I was a teenager, I pretty much had free will to do whatever it is that I wanted, and being a child at that time, having free will to roam around one of the worst cities in America, probably isn't the greatest of ideas, but it was my childhood. It is what it is, and it is everything that I knew.
Well, it sounded like you bloomed where you were planted, and you knew the layout.
I like this saying that I heard a long time ago, and I firmly believe it, that roses can grow from concrete, and I believe that's a lot of kids that grow up in the environment that I grew up in. There's not very much hope. They believe that that's all they're ever going to be.
Mm.
And I fell victim to that too. I remember for the longest time telling people, if you grew up where I grew up, you would be just like me too. And that's not so. I have a lot of friends back home that actually, went and did things with themselves, after they got out of school, and they didn't fall victim to, things that they saw going on in the streets. And I happen to be one of those ones that made choices
I like that word.
to head down that road. There was a lot of times where I didn't believe that I made those choices because I like to play the victim. And
Say more about playing the victim. That seems to be a common theme among a lot of people.
yeah, for as long as I can remember, it was always, it was always your fault, and it was always this person's fault, and I never took a good look at myself. I always felt like I was victim of the circumstances. If I would have had this, things would have been different. If if my dad would have not been who he was, like, things would have been different. And the reality is that I could have went the other way.
You could have made other choices.
Absolutely. So many people in my same shoes use it as a motivator, and not an excuse. And for me, it was an excuse.
And when we talk about wise mind choices, sometimes people think, well, those would be the obvious ones, those would be the no-brainer ones. However, wise mind choices can be difficult, and there can be a lot of pain attached. So you lived in a culture where everybody kind of thought the same way. And, did Will want to be the oddball or the...
Yes and no. Because, like I said, I chose not to look at the ones who weren't making the right choices. I can remember early in my childhood, I remember looking at the guys on the corner who seemed to be very successful because they dressed real nice. They always seemed to have the prettiest women.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I
money?
always saw that as a sign of success.
Sure.
And I can remember, from as long as I can remember, I remember telling teachers, because I was the guy who was extremely smart. And I remember telling teachers, they would say, you have so much potential. And I would say, leave me alone.
Mm.
And I can remember telling
Where was
teachers,
that coming from?
wanting to fit in, because I grew up in an environment that it wasn't very popular to be smart. It wasn't, it wasn't the cool thing to do. Like, even the people who were educated talked very uneducated.
Uh-huh.
It just seemed to be a way of life. back where I'm from. And I'm sure I only have where I'm from, but I'm sure you can go into any neighborhood here in the city of Pittsburgh and you find the same type of things.
Sure, sure. So, what we do on this show, then, rather help people try to fit in, we ask them to celebrate their uniqueness, Will, to embrace and celebrate their uniqueness.
Well, I genuinely do that now. I definitely don't need to be the apple of everybody's eye anymore. As a matter of fact, I've come to really walk a path that doesn't seem to be ventured by most. Um, I often in today's society, I like to think of it as I'm not a trained monkey. You can't just tell me anything and have me accept it. Like I have a brain and I've learned to think for myself. And just because you force feed me something doesn't mean that I'm going to accept it as truth.
Just because somebody says something doesn't make it true.
That's right.
Okay. So often, Will, what we do is we suggest to people that flowers don't compare themselves to other flowers, they bloom. So, could you share with us a little bit about your story? Tell us a bit about the struggles, kind of what happened, and what it was like, and what you did about it.
Well, like I said, it wasn't always bad. It wasn't always bad at all. I grew up pretty happy. And I noticed right around 17 where this thing started to spiral out of control as far as the path that I was headed down. But my behaviors had changed way before that. I can remember at an early age realizing that, the school that I went to was going to, they were going to pass me regardless if I showed up and did the work or not.
Uh,
And, the coaches that I played for was going to make sure that I played whether I showed up and did what I was supposed to do or not. And so I learned how to manipulate at a pretty young age, and I learned that there wasn't very many consequences for my actions, until I got older. But I noticed at 17, I started to battle with drugs and alcohol a lot more. And I started to, every time I would be bored, it would be okay to, just go to drink. And I think that's because, where I grew up, like it was nothing for us as 16, 15-year-olds to go walking into the local store and get a 40 or whatever it is. And it wasn't nothing for us to find drugs because it was everywhere we looked. So, it became kind of a way of life.
A way of life. Well, quite often we suggest to people that using drugs, using alcohol, those type of things makes nothing to do, something to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's just what it was. You don't go to school, you don't have a job. What is there left to do? You can only play basketball for so long. And that's basically what my life was. So I would play basketball during the day and we'd get high and I'd, sell drugs in the evening and we'd get high.
Yeah.
So, and that was pretty much, just the extent of everything. Basically, and I knew that it was wrong. I remember at 18 years old, the day I came to Pennsylvania, I was 18 and I was standing there and it was like 2 a.m. And I can remember the thought come over me that there's got to be more to life than this, and I just got a brilliant idea to move to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And my mom had lived here, and she had lived here for a couple years. That last time that I came up, that I was telling you about, she stayed, and so I knew she was here, and I just think I wanted to run. I wanted to run to get away from me.
Get away from me.
And it had nothing to do with Baltimore. I thought it did. I thought it had everything to do with Baltimore. And looking back now, I know that it was always me.
Wherever you go, there you are.
But at the time, a young teenager fighting thoughts and feelings and emotions that I had no idea, were, and I didn't even know at that time that I was a genuine person.
A genuine person, yeah. Yeah, it's hard to do that when the drugs and alcohol make us something that we're not.
When you have an environment that doesn't allow you to be a genuine person, any type of feelings, any type of emotions is a sign of weakness.
Yeah, let's talk about that, a sign of weakness.
So, I there was things that, I had a chip on my shoulder. I often share this. I don't know for what. It might have been because I was smaller than everybody. The society calls it the Napoleon complex. Um, or being white where I grew up. I'm not quite sure. Being a redhead bothered me growing up. Kids are cruel. Kids are cruel. I was cruel. And there's a passage in a book that I read that says, "Hurt people hurt people." And I think
hurt people.
And I just think living in a fractured environment, with so many people hurting, taught me how to hurt people. I can never tell anybody, hey, you hurt my feelings. I can never tell anybody like, this. It was always, and for the longest time, the only way I knew how to react was in sheer anger.
Okay, so here you come, an angry young guy trying to escape himself, comes to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And I picked Pittsburgh apart immediately. I got out at the bus terminal and I remember looking, and I share this a lot. And I remember seeing all these trees, and, I remember driving down to go up 28, and I remember seeing deers. And I thought to myself, what in the world is this country place? Because the city that I'm from, it is nothing. We don't have wildlife. We have rats, stray dogs, and seafood. That's the extent of our wildlife. So it was just and looking back now, I know that it had nothing to do with Pittsburgh, but everything to do with change.
Everything to do with change. Wow.
And change is so uncomfortable. I've been changing for a long time now, and change is still uncomfortable. It's crazy. I didn't learn very many skills as far as work skills. Where I grew up, and I never kept a job, and I look back now, and I'm always thinking I'm always a newcomer. Because I've journeyed into this professional field, and I'm always trying to get further ahead in life, and move along. So I'm always starting new somewhere, because I'm since the time I decided to change my life, it's always been about, okay, well, how can I move forward? How can I advance? And so I've never sat somewhere too long, since I changed. And so everything's always a new learning experience.
Well, we always talk about every stage of a person's life requires a new individual. And some people are unable to grasp that concept. So it sounds like before you had these clarity moments, there was some bumps in the road, Mr. Will.
There absolutely was many, bumps in the road. I always talk about this. My oldest son is 21 years old, and if my memory serves me right, I've known you the better part of that 21 years. And I could be, it's kind of jumbled together, but I first tried to change my life in 1997, right before he was born, because I knew I had a son. Something had to change, and
so it sounds like you had taken a hostage or two along the way, and
Their poor mother. I don't know if hostage does her any justice. That poor woman endured a monster. She didn't even endure a man; she endured a monster. And I think about that all the time. We had a conversation, the other day, and she said, I made a statement that I will live the rest of my life trying to prove to you that I'm sorry. And she said, I already know you're sorry. I don't need you to do that. I just need you to be my friend. And I said, I'm not doing it for you. And that's how I think about things. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. And I know that if I think in my mind, if I ever lose the mindset that I have to prove to myself every day that I'm sorry, I'll forget and I'll start doing things that suggest that I'm not sorry. Sorry is an action word, Jim.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.